everyone, we are back. Camera's on. Right, so you guys have any questions regarding the previous chapter before we move forward? Let me know if you have questions. Right. No questions as I can see. All right, so we're going to move forward and we're going to talk about New Jersey agency and business practices. Now, guys, we already talked about all this stuff: agency relationships, disclosure duties, conduct of the business, and prohibited activities. It's a quick review as we've been doing again since we started the New Jersey portion of this course. I think you guys already know what an agency is, right? Who can tell me what does agency mean? Let me know in the chat real quick. What does agency, word agency? All right, I see the guild is listening in. Good to have you here. Let me know your answers. Well, and yeah, relationship between agent and client. Now, agent, remember, agent is the broker, right? So because you represent the broker, you're a sub-agent of the client. Very good. But it could also be, same here, Gil, same here. It could also be, guys, because an agency relationship could be also with the customer, right? Can we have an agency relationship with a customer? Let me know, guys. Can we have an agency relationship with the customer? We can have with the client, but can we have with the customer? All right, and I put the chat up. Who's dwelling? Who's the duel between? You don't have to type it, Miguel. I'm just messing with you. All right, and the correct answer is honest and fair dealings only. Agency relationship, it means you got hired. So who hires you is the principal, the client, not the customer. So we don't have an agency relationship with the customer. We can only have agency relationship with whoever hires. Okay? So therefore, client, or where's Elena? Elena, how do I spell this? Principal, right? And we have a fiduciary duty, if you guys remember, okay? So, don't yell at me. Spelled it above. I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it. Ah, it is there. Cool. Cool. Very good. Hey, thumbs up. Both of them for you. All right. Now, we have Buyer's agency, obviously, the buyer hired you. Simple. So you owe fiduciary duties to the buyer. Seller's agency, obviously, the seller hired you. So you owe fiduciary duties to the seller. Right? Disclosed dual agency, that means you represent both parties, so they both hired you. They're both clients. And you must disclose, hey, seller, I represent the buyer. Buyer, I represent the seller. And this must be in writing. So there has to be written consent from both parties, right? And then you have this one. Transaction broker. What is a transaction broker? Well, there's no agency relationship when you're a transaction broker. You do not represent neither the seller nor the buyer. So who do you represent? No one. You are just trying to facilitate the transaction. So as a transaction broker, there's no agency. All you're trying to do is treating everybody fairly and honestly and make sure they accomplish the goal that they set out to accomplish, right? Again, by focusing on the transaction. So all these must be told to the potential buyer or potential seller or potential landlord or potential tenant. All these different type of relationships must be disclosed. Seller's agent or landlord's agent, buyer's agent or tenant's agent, disclosal agent where you represent both, or transaction broker where you represent neither one of them. Okay? Next, CIS. Right? So CIS. The CIS or Consumer Information Statement is the document, guys, the document that talks about this types of relationships that you can enter into and what the clients or customers can expect from you. In the state of New Jersey, this is the document that must be presented to all sellers, buyers, and landlords and tenants of 1 to 4 family residence and also vacant 1 family lot. So licensees are required to provide the CIS. Okay, you have to provide the CIS all the clients and also all the customers, regardless if they're being sellers, buyers, landlords, tenants on residential property. Okay. Now, licensees are required to present the CIS at first contact with a customer and prior to any discussion of the customer's financial matters or motivation about buying or selling. Any discussion about buyers or sellers' motivation to buy or sell. So before anything, we have to disclose to the potential client or customer, hey, wait a minute, you want to buy, you want to sell? Great, but the state of New Jersey requires me to disclose a few things. Is that okay with you? Right? If they say yes, you disclose. If they say no, hey, listen, let's sit down. And once we sit down, I'll be able to go over everything with you. Right? So it's over the phone. You have to still explain it to them. And once you sit down with them, again, you have to present in writing. Failure to do so can result in your license suspension or revocation. Now, here's the thing, guys. I do challenge every single person in every single class that I have. I challenge everybody to call agencies and call agents and start talking about wanting to buy or wanting to sell and see what they say. By law, they have to disclose the potential agency relationships that can occur, right? And this is before you even open your mouth, because anything you say can be used against you in a transaction. Simple, right? It's like the memorandum rights I told you guys, right? So it can be used against you in a transaction. So if you're calling me, you want to buy, right? But I'm going to represent you as a transaction broker, so I really don't represent you. And then you are looking at a property that I represent the seller as a seller's agent. I already know everything about you as a buyer. This is where the issue is, right? So you have to explain to every single potential client or customer, right? The possible agency relationships that you can enter into. And Muslima just wrote, they don't. Yeah, call whoever. Give me names of the people or the agents, I'm sorry, and agencies that actually uphold this. Give me the names of those that will say, oh, wait a minute, I know you want to buy, I know you want to sell, but before we get into that, let me explain what could happen if I represent you as a seller's agent or buyer's agent or a disclosal agent or maybe just as a transaction broker. Let me explain that before you give me more information. Because again, anything you say could be used against you in a transaction, right? Of course, you're not going to say that part, but you will explain that. Gil just wrote, lately, Bruno, I've gained a ton of experience with that. With what? Agents not explaining things? Miguel, just general questions? What do you mean? Nobody calls an agent and says, well, they might call you and say, how's the market? Then you don't have to say anything. Yeah, how's the market? But if they say, hey, how's the market? Do you think it's a good time to sell? Do you think it's a good time to buy? And now they're asking something that will lead to you being an agent. So they're entitled to know how you could represent them or not. Okay? Guys, make sure you're on camera and you have the cameras pointed at you, please. Thank you very much. Those of you that don't have cameras pointed at you, remember that Zoom is recorded and I have my assistant helping me review the recordings. And if you're not present for the full time, then you will not get full credits, okay? Just being online does not mean that you're there. All right, so make sure you are there. Okay, next. While a customer is not required to sign the CIS, he or she will need to acknowledge receiving the CIS on subsequent offers, sales contracts, and leases. Signed CISs must be kept by the broker for 6 years because they're permanent records from the date of the sale, closing, or sale of execution, lease execution. Guys, highly recommend you download this. So go to your browser as soon as you can, after the class, obviously, and download this, the CIS, so you understand we have to read to your clients, okay? Now, I already explained what an agency is. You guys got that? An agency is not created by who pays the commission, right? Because anybody can pay the commission. The seller traditionally pays the commission, right? I'm getting a thumbs up from Verona. What does that mean? It was not for me. Are you guys having private chats? Saying. I know it all, okay? All private chats are recording and reported to me. Just saying. All right, so what was I saying? So again, agency relationship is not created by who pays the commission, because the seller, as an example, usually agrees to pay the commission. If a buyer hires you, right, then you represent the buyer, you don't represent the seller. You're not going to do the best for the seller because they're paying the commission. No, you're going to do the best for the buyer because that's your client. And if your client happens to buy that particular property, then you get compensated for it, okay? All right. Disclosure duties. If you guys remember, anything and everything that could affect the proposed transaction must be disclosed. So anything that could affect the transaction, what is that called? It's called material facts. Okay? So must be disclosed if it's material facts. Okay, we just discussed in chapter 26 about interstate property, so I'm going to skip this. We just talked about it. It has to be registered with the state of New Jersey. It has to be a 7 calendar day right of rescission, and so on. Okay, so we just covered this. What is material fact and information? Okay, again, anything that could affect the transaction. Okay, so material fact or a piece of information is defined as something that, if known, might have caused a buyer or seller to make a different decision about entering into a sales or rental contract. You guys remember going over this? Let me know if you remember going over this stuff. Raise your hand. Okay, now hop on 1 foot. Let me know you're there. Joke. Just some of you still did not raise your hand, so I want to make sure. All right. So you guys know you must disclose everything even as soon as you find out. So let's say that's not immediate, but then later on you find out something that could affect the transaction. You still must disclose any discovered or discoverable defects to the buyer. And this is regardless of who you represent. If you notice, it says licensee. It doesn't say seller's agent or buyer's agent. It says licensee. So if you represent the seller, but there's an issue that's a physical condition that could affect the transaction, you must provide that info to the other side immediately. Okay? For instance, it was not there, but now it is. Water leakage, mold, cracks in the foundation, right? Maybe you did not notice immediately, or maybe the seller was hiding, right? As soon as you find out any of these as example, don't you think these could affect the transaction? Right? Different values, right? So yeah. Required disclosures do not include, so this is just like the general agency is the same thing. Required disclosures do not include what? Social conditions, psychological impairments, or a stigmatized property. For instance, if somebody died on the property, it does not affect the value of the property, right? We talked about this. If there's noisy neighbors, loud parties, barking, all that stuff is the neighborhood. It's apparent, it's visible if the buyer drives around and gets to know the neighborhood, right? So again, these situations do not affect the physical condition of the property, therefore do not need to be disclosed because they don't affect the value. Sellers, remember I said they can tell you there's no mold in the basement because they painted, but now all of a sudden there was rain and mold came through, right? So here's the thing. You got to tell the seller, hey, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, I'm like your doctor. If you don't tell me everything about the house that you know, right, there's no way I can properly assist you in marketing the property. It's as simple as that. Tell me everything, because the more info I have, the easier it will be for me to market your property, right? So is there any leak? Is there any damage to the roof? Is there any damage to the siding? Is there any damages at all that could affect this transaction? Because remember, if later on we find out that there was something that was hidden, right, and the seller had knowledge, or we can prove that was there before, right, then the seller is liable. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, up to 6 years, you're liable for this transaction. So if there's something that could be apparent, like a sewage backup, as an example, right, let us know now so we can either attempt to correct it by having estimates already, right, or let the buyer know so they can bring their own estimate. Simple. Like, you don't have to fix it, right, per se, right? Seller, you don't have to fix it, but you can have estimates already prepared or acknowledge that there's issues. It will bring down the value of your house, yes, right? But the buyer's well informed, and you reduce the possibility of getting sued. Now, anybody remembers Clue? Let me know if you remember Clue. Give me a thumbs up if you remember Clue. Great. So Clue is a comprehensive loss underwriting exchange, and the question that you might have in the state exam is, what is a good source of information for the insurance claims within the past 5 years? What is a good source of information? And they're going to give you two answers. I told you this before. One of them is going to be comprehensive loss insurance exchange. The other one is going to be comprehensive loss underwriting exchange. Remember, underwriting is risk assessment. So if a company is going to insure your property, right, at closing, then they must know what are the potential risks of the property. So risk assessment, right? It's underwriting. Don't get fooled by insurance claim and look for the insurance answer. Don't get fooled by that. And if you have no clue what to answer, pick Clue. Simple, right? By the way, the acronym is not going to be there, but it will say Comprehensive Loss Underwriting Exchange. Okay, Erica has a question. I'm waiting. Oh, I didn't freeze. You froze. You didn't hear the answer? Okay, come back. Back to the screen. Don't run away. See this? There's going to be two answers very similar. One's going to say insurance instead of underwriting. All I was saying, because they're asking about insurance losses, right? I don't want you to look for the answer that says insurance. There's going to be two very similar answers. One of them is going to say underwriting. That's risk assessment. Every time they insure your property, right? Every time they insure the property, they have to assess the risk of the property. Just like insuring you for a car. They have to underwrite you or assess you as a risk. Are you a high risk, medium, or low risk? And your premiums will change based on the amount of risk, right? So again, what I said is if you don't have no clue, pick clue. Whatever acronym matches, hey, I have no clue. Simple. Okay? We talked about disclosure to seller. What type of disclosures to the seller do we have to present? Right, disclosure to the buyer is easy. Are there issues with the property? But what about disclosures to the seller? What do we tell a seller about a buyer? Simple, guys. And this happened to a family member recently. They were buying a house. I'm sorry, they were selling their house, and the buyer that they had for the house was presented by a different realtor, right? Different agency, different everything. The agent already knew. That the buyer had lost the job, right, during the whole pandemic. The agent already knew that. Did the agent disclose that information? No. Do you think that's a material fact that should have been presented? Absolutely. Because if the buyer has a possibility of not being able to buy, then the agent has the responsibility to disclose, to pass along that information. You guys got it? So it's very, very important that you pass along that information. The buyer's inability to acquire financing. So then the seller has an option of, okay, if they can't buy, then we'll move on to somebody else. Simple. The agent must also present all offers immediately. All offers must be presented immediately. Stephanie has a question. That. To the buyer? Sure. Yeah. So are you. Remember I said when we talked about real estate finance, I said, hey, make sure you tell your buyer that they cannot sign up for loans. They cannot use their credit cards. They're approved based on the current financial condition. So don't even breathe for the next 3 months, right? Remember I said that? So the mortgage advisor or loan originator is supposed to provide that info. But guys, this is why we need to have, and else, this is why we need to have basic understanding of everything. So we can advise the client as well, like a second voice, advise them, hey, the issue is, if you change your current financial situation, including losing your job, we might not be able to close. So if that's an option, if that could happen, or if that happens, you need to let me know right away so I can pass that information along to the other side. But again, the realtor knew already and did not disclose to the other realtor, to the listing realtor, right? Or listing agent. Did not disclose to them. Could they get sued for not closing? Yeah, they could. Is it worth it? Probably not. But could they get sued? Absolutely. Right? By the way, as much as I keep on saying, and I played the video for you guys of not my monkey and all that stuff, yeah, not your monkey, to do the work for a mortgage officer, to do the work for an attorney. It's not your job to give legal advice or mortgage advice or anything like that, but it is your job to make sure every party does what they're supposed to do. So could you give hints to your client and say, hey, client or customer, make sure you talk to your mortgage rep if this happens to you. because you might not be able to buy at the time. So make sure you talk to the mortgage rep, right? Are you supposed to do that? Yes, absolutely. Should you relay that information to the other side as soon as you know from the mortgage rep that they cannot close, or they will not be able to close probably the next month or so, whatever is the designated time, then yes, you must disclose that to the other side right away, all right? Okay, I already talked about this. You're supposed to investigate the whole property and provide that information, whatever you found, provide that information to a potential buyer. We're not required to go above and beyond whatever our job is. So obviously, if it's something on the roof, I was just talking about that this morning. If it's something that's on the roof, do you have to get up on the roof and see how the shingles are? No. If it's something that might be above the drop ceiling, so I have drop ceiling here, do I have to get on the ladder and lift it up and see how the drop ceiling? No. We are supposed to, as real estate agents, we are supposed to look around the room, do a full 360, right? Up, down, everything, right? And look at what's apparent. Everything else will be asking questions to the professionals or even to the seller, and asking the seller to prepare a seller's property condition disclosure statement. So that's, again, the not my monkey. Let's put it on the people that are supposed to know this stuff. Our job, again, is just to look around, right? Okay? Look around with seeing eyes, meaning you're paying attention to what you're doing. Okay? Very important. Next, off-site conditions. Guys, what does this mean? Off-site. Let me know. Let me know in the chat. Off-site. Separate from the property, not on site. Correct. So it's separate from the property. So what we're saying, anything around the premises or away from the premises. What we're saying is that it's not on your property. So if it's off-site conditions, let me ask you, if it's not on the property, do we need to disclose stuff that's not on our property? How does something not on your property affect your property? Isn't that weird? Right? This has to be one of those New Jersey weird laws, right? Can anybody let me know, why do you think we need to disclose stuff that's not on site? How would anything off site affect our property? Let me know. That's right. Absolutely. All good things. Underground oil tanks is tough to know if it's on somebody else's property, right? You're not going to go inspect your neighbor's properties. So we're talking about off-site, okay? But if you have, so let's look at this one. If there's a gas station right next to your property, I'll take this answer, okay? Does that make sense? So yes, absolutely, guys. These are potential off-site conditions, and these could affect the value and desirability of the property, and affect also, not just that, it could affect also the property itself, not just the value and desirability, but affect the property itself. So must be disclosed. Now, what New Jersey created was 2 different types of disclosures that must be with every single contract. One of them applies for new construction, the other one applies to resale of properties. If it's a new construction, then the seller is required to provide the buyer with a notice of something that could be located away from the property, right? And that notice must be given within 5 business days, and the buyer has the option of canceling within the 5 business days, right? So very, very important, because for resales of properties, we don't have the same condition. So what is the difference between a new construction and a resale? If it's a new construction, nobody has lived there before. If it's a resale, I'm the one. I'm not the construction company. I'm not the developer. I'm a homeowner, and I'm selling it to you. That means I've lived there on the property. Okay. So the difference between new construction and resale is whether somebody has lived there before or not. And the rule says if somebody was able to live there before you, so can you. Pretty much what it is. Nobody was there and you just find out that there's something away from your property that could affect your property, yeah, we'll let you back out. Pretty much what it is. Crazy New Jersey rules, right? The right should have been there for both of them. Consumer Fraud Act. So this is not just New Jersey Act again. We did talk about fraud. We talked about antitrust laws already, right? And Consumer Fraud Act specifically in New Jersey clearly states or includes that any unconscionable commercial practice, deception, fraud, false pretense, false promise, misrepresentation, or the knowing concealment, suppression, and omission of any material fact. So if you did it on purpose, then it's fraud. That is direct fraud. You did it on purpose. You knew that there was mold in the basement and you helped the seller paint that basement. Like, yeah, you're part of it. You knew about it and you did not help, but you did not say anything either. So yeah, that's fraud. You guys got it? So to be actionable, the fraud must have resulted in an ascertainable loss by the injured party. Is this the statute of frauds? No. So, well, it's under the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act, but statute of frauds is more than this. But yes, part of it will be there. Now, this act provides 3 ways consumer fraud may be committed. There's the affirmative misrepresentation, making an untrue statement. So the affirmative, so making an untrue statement of fact, whether or not the licensee knew that it was untrue. It includes negligent and unintentional misrepresentation. So you said something like, let's say the roof is 5 years old, when in fact it was 10. But how did you know, right? Is it something that you should have known, right? Is it something that there's no way for you to know? That's what will define if it was negligent or unintentional misrepresentation. Knowing omission, again, is direct fraud. That's direct misrepresentation. Law violation statute and regulations, they are specific to the situation and were enacted to interpret the act itself. What are the penalties for violating the act? $10,000 for first offense and up to $20,000 for second and each subsequent offense. Now, in addition, the violator can be ordered to pay 3 times the amount of damages. 3 times. This is a constitutional right for treble damages, where you can go after 3 times what the damage actually was, including plus injured party, attorney fees and legal fees. Depending on what it was, or if you paid or did not pay the fee, you can also be arrested. Now, how can you avoid these penalties? Simple. There's relief under the Consumer Fraud Act. There's relief of how you handle the situation, right? So if you can prove, hey, I did not know that the information was false or deceptive. I did not know, right? I made a diligent effort, like I asked questions and I was not told the right answer, right? Or, again, not my monkey. I was relying on information from the home inspection report, from the government employee, or from the seller's property condition disclosure statement. Again, not my monkey. I was told by them, so point the fingers. They told me, right? I know most of you guys probably grew up with your parents telling you, hey, don't point fingers, that's bad. Don't blame somebody else, that's really bad. Well, now I'm telling you, forget what your parents told you, right? I'm literally telling you, go ahead and point fingers. It's not your responsibility, all right? By the way, I'm only saying this because this is not your particular business. If you're the head of the business, like we talked about here, the broker, If you're the one, the chief, the head, the broker, the CEO, the top of whatever, of the food chain, whatever it is, then you're the one responsible for everybody that follows you. Simple as that, right? In this case, it was not my field of expertise, so I was told. Simple, okay? Risk management, guys, we had a whole chapter about this, about risk management. But how can we reduce the amount of risk in this profession? How can we reduce the amount of risk in this profession? Very simple. Errors in omission insurance. Exactly, Muslima. So errors in omission insurance is just like your car. If you have a car and you go out on the road, there's a chance that you might make a mistake. So error, right? There's a chance you might make a mistake while driving and hit somebody else, correct? There's a chance. So this means that you need to protect yourself, and we get liability insurance. Well, for professional services, our liability insurance, in case we damage somebody else, like our actions damage somebody else, our liability insurance is called errors and omissions. Sometimes it's carried by your broker, actually most of the times. Other times it might have to be carried by you independently. Depends on how your brokerage is structured, okay? But these do not cover fraud. Very, very important. Do not cover fraud. How do you guys feel about this so far? Like, do you guys see that it's more like a review than an actual chapter, right? Is this helpful? Let me know. Thumbs up if this is helpful so far. All right, because Francielli was like, no, we got to review. We got to review with you. Now I'm telling you, that's what we're doing. Right? So sorry to put you on the spot, Francielli. But this is what I keep on feeling. These chapters are more like reviews. There's just one or two things that are specific to the state of New Jersey. Everything else is repeat, repeat, repeat. Like this stuff I talked about this morning, pretty much, what I'm going to say right now. And this morning was a different chapter. It was chapter 20, professional practices, right? So, New Jersey Real Estate Commission requires all licensees to strictly comply with the laws of agency and the principles of governing fiduciary relationships. You guys got that. We need to disclose. Simple as that. What is a client? What is a customer? They need to know. Okay, we have the obligation to deal honestly and fairly with customers. Who are the customers? The people we do not represent. Simple as that. Okay. In addition, for suffering discipline for violating the real estate laws and regulations, right? We can also incur liability for any of the following. So it's not only the disclosure, but also breaching of fiduciary duties. Because you're supposed to care, you're supposed to obey, you're supposed to be loyal, and you're supposed to disclose and also hold proper accounting. So if you fail to do any of these for your clients, you're breaching fiduciary duties. If you fail to meet the required standard of care, like you have to care so much for your client that you go above and beyond to get the information needed or the support needed for your client. Again, when I say above and beyond, there's limitations to this, which is you're not going to do it for them, but you're going to make sure that you know everything about that property or everything about the transaction and assist them in getting to where they need to go, either by recommending what's the next step or by holding their hand and saying, hey, okay, now we're going to go here. We're going to go get permit at City Hall. Come on, right? Whatever it is. But you have to go over everything. Nurka, that's what we're doing. We're doing reviews. That's what it is. Can I? Oh, I already had days off. Okay, you're right. So I was going to say, can I have a day off? We'll see what we do. All right, next. Failure to meet standard care, conflict of interest. So if you know that you represent one party, let's say I gave this morning the example. I'm helping my brother sell his property, right? It's not my property, right? But there's a conflict of interest. So if I have a buyer that wants to buy my brother's property, shouldn't I disclose that the seller is my brother? right? The buyer has the right to say, wait a minute, if the seller is your brother, then you're going to push more or pull more to his side than you're going to pull to mine. So disclosures, disclosures, disclosures. Being guilty of any of the above can potentially cause the loss of a seller or a buyer. That's like the least of your worries. But it could result in loss of commission or other compensation, also the least of your worries. It could result in a civil lawsuit or criminal prosecution of the licensee. It could also result in disciplinary sanctions such as license suspension, or revocation. All right, so it could result in all these. All right, next thing we're going to talk about real quick is Truth in Lending Act and Regulation Z. Who can tell me what is the Truth in Lending Act and Regulation Z? Let me know in the chat real quick. Truth in Lending Act, Regulation Z. What does that mean, Miguel? APR? What's an APR? Federal Loan Protection Regulation Z. What does that mean? Tell me, what does it mean? Like, what is TILA and what is Regulation Z? What is it about? Regulation Z is the one controlling the rates. No, Fed controls the rates. What is Regulation Z? Close to it. Regulation Z is misleading information by the mortgage company. They must disclose financial obligations, conflict of interest. All right, so highly recommend you guys go over chapter 17. But Regulation Z and TILA is about disclosing the actual credit terms and the cost of that loan. So when highly recommended, yes. So when Miguel wrote APR, and I was messing with him, it's because APR is not what Regulation Z is. But APR is about you knowing, Regulation Z is about you knowing the true cost of borrowing money. So both TILA and Regulation Z, right, these are the same thing, right? The requirement is that they disclose to you, hey, it's going to be 5.19% APR versus 5% interest rate. That 5.19% is going to cost you $100,000 over the next 30 years, right? You borrow $200, it's going to cost you $100,000. So Regulation Z, every time you see TILA or Regulation Z, is about the true cost of obtaining credit. Everybody must be informed and be able to compare the costs from one lender to the next. Remember I talked about my Bank of America hand and my Wells Fargo hand? They're both 5%. But with Bank of America, you might pay 5.24, while with Wells Fargo you might pay 5.19 APR, like Miguel wrote, right? So APR. So it is different. You have to be aware of all the costs and be able to shop around. Okay. Regulation Z also governs the advertisement regulations. What can you advertise? So there's something called triggering terms in your advertisement. Triggering terms means whatever you're telling me requires additional disclosures. Non-triggering terms, they're liberal, so they're generic. So that means that it could apply to anyone. Triggering terms is when I'm telling you, you only need $5,000 down payment. Now, can I tell you only need $5,000 down payment? No, unless I already went through your financials and you qualify for this particular program. Now I can tell you it's $5,000 down payment. if I tell you the dollar amount of repayment, so hey, don't worry about it. Buy this house for only $1,000 a month. Do we all qualify in the same way? No. Do we all have the same job? Do we all have the same credit score? No. So how can I tell you guys that your payment is going to be only $1,000 a month, right? So triggering terms is pretty much saying what I said before in the in advertisement in the previous chapter. Triggering terms must include, hey, to a qualified buyer, right? The full APR. Like triggering terms, if you disclose something that's specific, then you also have to give more info about it, right? You have to make sure you disclose everything about the loan at that time. Triggering terms. What if you put in the fine print? What if you put in the fine print? Oh, here. Can you guys read what's there? No, right? So when we're saying put in the fine print, that they do that, but the disclosure is there. Like, you guys can read it, but it's like you have to really pay attention as long as disclosure is there. But what they did, smart about it, what they did, TILA and Regulation Z was also adjusted, that it has to be kept at the same font as everything else. So when you say fine print, yeah, it just means it's there. It's blended there somewhere. But they have to keep it in the same, yeah. No, you have, if you put $5,000 down, then it's based on certain things, based on qualified buyer, and now you have to put more terms that it says here. Like the APR rate and the loan terms must be included in the same size type or larger, right? If you guys ever looked at your credit card statements or applications, right, it says, hey, pre-approved for 29 point whatever APR or 16 point whatever APR or 9 point whatever APR. And that's the biggest number you're going to find there, right? So that's what it is, and all the loan terms and so on. So can I put $5,000 down? That's all you need for this house? Sure. But at that point is based on a qualified buyer, based on certain rates and certain loan terms, like a 15-year loan or 20-year loan or 30-year loan and other criteria that might be required. Okay. Okay. The next thing we have is residential rental referral agencies. What does this mean? Well, as realtors, as salespeople, our license is a New Jersey, for instance, New Jersey real estate salesperson license, right? It doesn't say commercial, it doesn't say residential, it doesn't say sales, it doesn't say rentals. It's broad. We can do everything. But if you're helping somebody rent their unit, so a landlord or a tenant, right, then it falls under the same category as a sale. It's a real estate transaction, and therefore you must have your license. Okay? Not only must you be licensed to help somebody rent, look in green, you must also have a written contract with either the prospective tenant or the rental with the rental homeowner. And this contract includes the services to be performed, the date and term of the contract, and the fees to be paid for the services. And also, if there's a refund, it must be stated in the agent's refund policy. If there's no refund, it must be stated in the agent's refund policy. Okay? So everything must be disclosed. Make sure it's in writing. One thing that's here that stands out, the second bullet point. I just want to point, the reason why I have it here in green is just to point out something. There's a lot of realtors that use what's called clickbait. Again, we mentioned that in the previous chapter. Mentioning again, there's a lot of realtors that use something called clickbait. And that is putting an advertisement out there that's going to call your attention, bring you in, or lure you in, right? It's bait to lure you in. So the agency, and obviously the agents, right? Because everything the agents do belongs to the agency, must not advertise or refer clients to addresses or properties that do not exist or they are not available for rents. So can I put 3-bedroom, 2-bath units in the Ironbound section of Newark for $1,500 a month? Well, first of all, based on the price, it does not exist. Right? That's the first thing. Like 3-bedroom, 2-bath for $1,500. Show me one right now. I'll go. I'm the one renting. Right? So then I can sublease to somebody else. So no, it's not going to happen. But if you don't have that listing, you cannot advertise. That's what we're saying here. So with that being said, you need to consistently check an advertised property every day. If it's advertised, like on Craigslist, on newspapers, Facebook Marketplace, for instance, Instagrams, whatever it is that you YouTube, whatever it is you're advertising the property, every day you must check to see if it's still available. Okay? If it's simply listed, that means it's just on the MLS every 3 days. Okay? So if it's advertised, the general public has immediate access. If it's simply listed, realtors have access. So every 3 days at least, make sure you check it. Okay? Very, very important. Next. Broker cooperation. Under broker cooperation. Oh, hold on. There's a question. Whew, it's a long one. Let me drink before I read this one. You fell into the same thing. Your friend fell in. Your friend, because it's always a friend, by the way. Your friend fell into the same thing that one of our realtors fell for. Exactly the same thing. So I had a friend of mine looking for an apartment, and someone in another country used an online advertisement to lure her in. He said he was a doctor traveling, and if she sends him money, she can rent. So that also happened to an agent of ours. He was so excited, poor thing, so excited. Oh, these two doctors from, I forgot where it was from, but these two doctors, because he is Arab, so they speak. They spoke the same language. I think that's how they got to him. So, and they started reaching out to him. Oh, we needed a realtor like you, somebody that speaks our language. We're coming to New York, and we need to buy 2 properties, one for me, one for my partner. My colleague, and we got cash, $2.4 million. Like, we already saw a few of these properties, right? And he's so excited. He started looking for the properties, right? Like the properties that they told him, right? And he comes to me, Bruno. Can you believe I got a buyer? Actually, it's 2 buyers, $2.4 million each, cash, and they already saw some of the units in. I think one of them was, or 2 of them were in Jersey City, right? He's all excited. I'm like, listen, if that is true, that is awesome. That's all I said. If that is true, that is awesome. Like, I'm not going to discredit it because it could happen, right? But I was already guessing something like this way, right? So a couple days later, he comes to my office, says, Bruno, the guy's stuck at the airport. I'm like, what do you mean the guy's stuck at the airport? He's stuck at the airport. Somebody at the airport stole his bag, right? Stole his bag and his ID. So his ticket and the ID were there, and he's trying to tell the agency, I mean, his credit cards and all that stuff was there, and he's trying to tell the at the airport, right, that he is who he is and that he needs to buy so for him to travel, he would need to buy another ticket. That's what it was. But the only thing he had was his passport. Wait a minute. I asked my guy. I said, "Look, you're telling me that he lost his stuff? They stole his wallet, right? He has his passport. The only thing, and all he needs is for you to send him $1,200 for a ticket to come here." Okay. If he has his ID, then it should be able to tell the people there at the airport, this is me, and doesn't need to present anything else. Same, right? Second question. If the flight is only like 3 hours, he can go to a bank, present his ID, and withdraw money from his account, right? Why do you have to send him money? Yeah, that's what I was thinking, he tells me, right? Listen, this is a true story. So he brings me his phone, shows the picture of the guy at the airport, like I'm at the airport. And then I'm like, okay, ask him for his passport picture, because for you to send money to somebody, you need to have that information. That's what I said. So send him a passport picture. And after a while, the guy sends him passport. The reason why I'm going with this story, because this happens a lot. You guys got to be careful with this stuff. As an individual or even as a realtor. He gets the picture. I'm like, I'm looking at the passport, like almost perfect, but I'm looking at the passport. And I have this problem, guys. I don't know if you guys ever notice. I pick on things, right? Like people, right? Little details here and there. Like when people misspell stuff, right? I'm always picking on stuff, right? And here comes the passport. Look at it. Something is off. And I happen to have my passport. So I got my passport. Oh, by the way, it was an American passport. The guys were there and they were traveling back, right? They're Americans. The American passport says something is wrong. So I pull my passport, I put it next to his. I'm like, I knew it. Look right here, there's differences, right? And then, not satisfied with my answer, what does my realtor do? Calls his wife and say, hey, take a picture of my passport, send it to me, right? So now we compared two American passports, mine, the agent, and this person from another country that says, hey, I'm American, I'm trying to get back, could you please send me $1,200 so I can buy a $2.4 million mansion? Anyway, you can see how this goes. So as soon as he gets his passport, he's still doubting, he's still looking, he still doesn't want to believe that he just lost two $2.4 million deals in a few seconds, right? And I showed him. So he's like, oh, man, I knew it was too good. Oh, it could happen, right? But unfortunately, they just did it to you. It happened to me in the past, right? I sent money in the past, like years ago. I did send a little bit of money for a particular transaction. Anyway, bottom line, do not feed into any buyer, right? Do not give money to anyone out of your pocket. You can give credits or rebates at closing. But never, ever, ever, guys, never send any type of monies to somebody you do not know. That is the bottom line, right? And it's awful what I'm about to say, but I don't even donate to people that I don't see. Meaning, if I see somebody on the streets that needs the money to eat or whatever, I'll take them to eat. They need clothes, I'll take them to buy clothes. They ask for money, don't have it. Okay? These non-for-profit companies out there where they're driving Rolls Royces and the top of the line cars and planes, right? Yet they're constantly asking for money for somebody in a country in Africa or whatever, as an example, right? I do not donate. Nope. It could be valid. It could be true. It could have a real purpose, but I don't trust. So if somebody needs help, I'll help, like directly. And I've had a student not too long ago asking me if I could help with some money because throughout this thing they lost their job, their unemployment had ended, right? They asked me for X amount of dollars, I sent them X amount of dollars, and then a week later I sent another X amount of dollars, and a week later another X amount of dollars without being requested, right? Because I knew that person. Do you guys understand? So I helped because I knew the person. I helped because I see the need. But this type of stuff, not anymore. I fell for it a couple times. Not anymore. All right? Show me who you are, like the real you. Give me as much info as you can, and then we'll talk about it. All right? So make sure you guys are alert for these scams. Okay, there's so many of them. All right, next. The next thing we have The next thing we have is brokers. Talking about broker cooperation. Brokers are required to cooperate with brokers from other firms and allow these brokers to show listed property. Remember I said, again, this is general, it's not New Jersey only. Remember I said you cannot say, oh, you're from RE/MAX, I'm not. So no, I'm not showing it to you. You cannot say that. Unless the client specifically directed you not to show property to anyone outside the firm, right? Another thing is, if you list the property, the MLSs here in New Jersey, most of the MLSs have a similar rule. MLSs here in New Jersey require that if you get a listing within 48 hours, it must be in the MLS. More than that, and you're trying to control the transaction, you could actually lose your license, be reported and lose your license. All right. So we just talk about that. Right here. This is what I just said. If a seller directs you to not cooperate with somebody else, says, hey, no, just keep it in-house, they must also sign the waiver. You guys have a copy of that waiver right here. And the waiver clearly says, I as the seller understand, right? I as the seller understand that by filling out this form or signing this form, I understand that my property will possibly take longer to sell because it's not exposed on the open market, right? My property might be sold because of this lack of exposure, might be sold for a lesser value. So I, as a seller, understand the risks of keeping it in-house versus exposing it to the world. And they have to sign this, okay? This was just updated 2020. This is the Attorney General Memorandum. Now, what is the attorney? You guys are going to hear this a lot of times. What is the Attorney General Memorandum? You guys remember when we talked about Fair Housing Act and Civil Rights Act and all that stuff? You guys remember that? Give me a thumbs up if you remember. Great. So you know that was about discrimination. So every time you see New Jersey Attorney General Memorandum, right? It's New Jersey Attorney General Memorandum of Law Against Discrimination. So it's where the Attorney General is letting the world know that you cannot discriminate. The requirement we have is that we present this memorandum to every potential listing. So if there's a seller or landlord, we have to let him know, hey, Mr. Seller, Mr. Landlord, we cannot discriminate, and here's the law, right? That's it. With every listing of a sale or rental, you must present this. If the seller disagrees, look right here in green, very, very important. If the seller disagrees, we talked about this in discrimination, but if the seller disagrees with the memorandum or says, I don't care about that, I'm still going to do whatever I want to do, then you must refuse the listing. Okay? If you're trying to discriminate, then you must have missed the memo. That's right. So, guys, so important. Do not lose your license because of somebody. I was just going to say something bad live YouTube. Do not lose your license over somebody uneducated. Let's go with that to be nice. Somebody uneducated. Because somebody that still discriminates is somebody that lacks education. That's pretty much it. All right? No offense to if any of you intend to discriminate. I did not call you uneducated. Yeah, I did. I will. I'm sorry. Sue me. That's all I can say. Oh, there you go. That's a great word. Goes back to the same thing, but yes. Sorry. Anybody that still does this. Forget that we're in 2020, but I get frustrated with these. All right, so prior to, so I'm on page 438. If you're on the physical book, you're probably on page 435 or 436. but pricing the property. Pricing the property. What does it mean to price the property? Guys, we already talked about this in listings as well. It's 423 for you? Okay. So we already talked. Oh, yeah, because they added a section here that you don't have yet. When we talk about listings, we are responsible, guys, to help the seller determine the best market value for their property. And what is market value? If you guys remember from appraisal chapter, market value is what the buying public will most likely pay for that property, right? So the market value is what they most likely pay for it. But who determines the listing price? The answer is the seller. Come on. Okay. The seller determines the listing price. So we're supposed to help the seller figure out what's the most probable price that the property will sell for, but ultimately, the seller's the one that determines how much they want to sell for. Now, obviously, can you walk away if it's unrealistic? Absolutely. Right? Should you walk away? Absolutely. Right? The property's $500,000. They want to sell it for $750,000. They're nuts. Walk away. Right? You don't want to be known as the agent that cannot sell any of the listings. You want to be known as the agent that keeps on closing. Simple. So don't get stuck with the clients. Right? This is a business. So don't fall in love with the deals. Very, very important. Now, while the seller is the decision maker of the price, most sellers do not have the knowledge or experience to determine the appropriate price at which the property will sell. So it is the agent's job to recommend the price based on comps. How do we do this? We went over this on chapter 16. We do the CMAs, not the Country Music Awards, but the comparative market analysis, right? So CMAs, comparative market analysis. Appraisals, appraise, we prepare CMAs, or if you guys remember, BPOs or even BOVs, right? Okay. Now, the agent should also ensure that the seller understands, as I said, that the selling price is ultimately determined by supply and demand in the local area. So, who determines the selling price? The buying public. If they are not buying, there's too much supply but not enough demand, right? Then they're not buying. So again, who determines the listing price? Write this down. Listing price is the seller. Who determines the market value? We do by using comps. And who determines the selling price, or how much the property actually sells for? The buying public, based on supply and demand. Three things you must remember. I don't know why this is strictly in the New Jersey portion when it's everywhere. The conditions are the same, right? You got to do comps. No, I'll charge more for that. But I said, not too fast. It was not too fast. I repeated it 3 times. Ready? 3, 2, 1. So I was gonna do a Ace Ventura type of thing, but no, I'm not gonna go back and forward. So first, who determines the listing price? The seller. Who helps determine the market value? We do, right? Through the comps. Who determines the selling price, which is the price that the property will sell for? The buying public, through supply and demand. So the buyers decide what they're willing to pay or not. So market value goes up because people are willing to pay more, not because sellers want to sell for more. No, right? Market goes down because buyers are not willing to pay that much. So it's not what sellers want, it's what the market demands. Sally, good? Okay. All right, so I'll send you the bill later, okay? Next, we got Megan's Law. Now, the Megan's Law, as you guys already know, is about sex offenders. Now, by now, I think you guys know this was a New Jersey law in 1995, unfortunately. It was a New Jersey law and then expanded to all the states. So, sex offenders, they are now registered. There's a state registry and there's a county registry. So, every time a sex offender, convicted sex offender, moves, they have to register with the correct department. They cannot just move and not let anybody know, because if they move and they find out that you moved, there's going to be a warrant for your arrest. So sex offenders, Megan's Law, associated immediately. Now, my question is not talking about federal law, but my question to you is, and I asked this morning, I was talking about professional practices, and I'm sure you guys remember from chapter 20. It's unfortunate, but the question has to be asked. Because your neighbor, let's say you're trying to sell your house, right? Let's say I gave the example 98 Adams here in Newark as an example, and you live, that's the house you're trying to sell, and your neighbor on 96 is a sex offender. My question is, how does your neighbor on 96 affect the value of your property? Right? It does not. Like, it's not the seller's fault, and it doesn't affect the property condition. The fact that there's a sex offender in the area, it's something that's discoverable by somebody that's concerned about it, right? But it does not affect the value. It's not like you're going to go there and say, hey, listen, so you're selling for 300, your neighbor's a sex offender, could we drop 50K? Right? You're not going to do that, right? It doesn't affect the value. Your decision is, I'm sorry, I won't buy, and walk away. Or, I'm single, it's okay, I'll live here, right? So whatever it is, everybody has a different take on this, right? Some people don't care, some people get affected by it, right? And some people are like crazy scared about it. So what the state requires is that we, like licensees, we cannot provide information about registered sex offenders. But every contract, every sales contract and leases must include a Megan's Law statement. So every single contract has to say, hey, be aware, Megan's Law is about convicted sex offenders, and there's a state registry at NewJerseyStatePolice.org, right, njsp.org. There's a registry of potential sex offenders in the area, right? The contract says that. And whatever the contract says is what we must say. If somebody asks you, hey, Bruno, is there any sex offenders in the area? Go right here. I cannot disclose that type of information because that will put me in liability towards the seller, if there is or if there's not. I do not know. I'm not required to check, but here's the website where you can get that info. Plain and simple. We cannot give that kind of information. It's illegal because, again, it affects the seller's ability to sell, and the seller is not at fault that somebody moved into the neighborhood and happens to be a sex offender. Any questions on this? Questions? Okay. All right, prohibited activities, violations, and penalties. Stuff we cannot do. So if you, and we already covered all of these as well, but this is stated specifically in Title 45, Chapter 15 of the New Jersey Real Estate License Act. If you make false promises or substantial misrepresentation, that is subject to disciplinary action. If you represent more than one party in the same transaction without disclosure, so undisclosed dual agency, right? It could be liable for it as well. Flagrant and continually making misrepresentations or false promises through agents, broker salespersons, or advertisement. Failing to account for money, right? That belongs to other people, and so on and so on and so on. So everything we've been going through in this chapter and pretty much for the past couple of weeks, everything that's illegal, it's right here stated directly, right? That it is a crime. You will have to pay for it. Look, there's a bunch of them. Go through these. Go through this list. Very important that you are aware of everything that we went over. Look at this one right here. If you are convicted of any crime, right? There might be a question. If you're convicted of a crime, remember I said even in the insurance claim, right? That a hit and run. Remember I mentioned to you guys a potential hit and run. So even if it's something that's not related to real estate, if you are convicted of a crime and you did not let the real estate commission know, you could be subject to disciplinary action. And I challenge you guys also to check the state enforcement that shows cases. One case there was regarding an insurance issue, an accident, right? So it was not part of real estate, but they lied on the application of not being convicted for a crime. Okay, being indicted could subject you to losing your license, and so on and so forth. Okay. Another one. This happened also in 2014. 2014. This happened. An agent further south of me, an agent represented himself as a broker. He was not the broker, right? So he lost his license and can never get. Lost his license, and he got revoked, and they gave him a penalty of I don't know how many years, but also a bunch of fines they had to pay for acting as a broker, right? Commingling and conversion, right? We talked about that. Use of an unlicensed individual. This happened as well. That's another action that's there. Unlicensed individual to perform acts that require license. So my assistant, me sending the assistant to, hey, go to this open house and hold the open house. I'm going to sit here, relax, and look pretty. That's it, right? Can't do that. If it requires a license, then you must be there. You cannot just send your assistant. That's what we're saying. Obvious. Discrimination or steering. We just went over this. Unauthorized practice of law. We're not attorneys. We're not lawyers. So we cannot make legal determinations of what you can or cannot do as a client, right? So again, make sure you advise them to talk to a potential, to a lawyer, right? Net listings in New Jersey is specifically outlawed, net listings. So open listing, exclusive agency, and exclusive right to sell, okay, no problem. Net listing is illegal. Oof. Right here. Okay, this kind of happened with a new agent here, right? So I'm being plain honest because this happens everywhere. A lot of people do not know and they take this practice. This happened with a brand new agent here. He went to show a property, and while showing the property, the seller approached the agent and they shared contacts and started a conversation. The seller was not very happy with the agent that he had for the listing, but that she had for the listing, right? And then what happened was our agent, not knowing better, our agent said, well, if you're unhappy, right? Your listing is about to expire. If you're unhappy, I can help you. You're still under a listing contract. We do not induce an individual, even though in this case was not the breach of contract because we're waiting until it ends, right? But we're already inducing them to the fact of changing the contract, right? And I'll tell you why. Because my agent had a buyer for that property. If the agent has a buyer for that property and the buyer wants to buy that property, who does that buyer belong to or that commission belong to? To the previous agent, right? So these are the things, guys. Don't do anything like that. Do not try to steal, but there's plenty of business. There's like over 9 million people in New Jersey. There's so much business out there. And okay, there's not many people selling, but you know what? There's rentals. There's a lot of rentals, right? So there's plenty of business. There's commercial, there's businesses, opening, closing. There's divorces, there's marriages, there's debts, there's newborns, there's need for more rooms, right? Look at Chris. He decided to have twins. Let's see what comes next, right? So This is what I'm talking about. There's so much business out there. There's no need for us to step on each other's toes. When I told Miguel, joking around, what is your market going to be? He says Newark. And I said, no. This is my town, right? Remember I said that? I don't care. There's so much business around, right? It's easy. I don't care if you come to Newark. All of you could come to Newark. I am me, and I have already my book of business. Like people that constantly refer or repeat business, right? If I lose one, I'll gain two. Simple. If I lose two, I'll gain one. Whatever. You guys understand? Don't step on each other's toes. It's not worth it. You could be subject to disciplinary action, including probation, revocation, and suspension, as well as fines of up to $5,000 for first violation of the act and up to $10,000 for subsequent violations. Okay? Now, the Real Estate Commission has the power to deny further issuance of the real estate license to a repeat or third-time offender. So you do this a third time, they can say you'll never, ever, ever have a real estate license in New Jersey again. And look, if your license is suspended, I see messages coming through. If your license is suspended in the state of New Jersey, guess what? When you go to New York or PA, there's a question they ask, which is your license suspended anywhere else by a real estate commission or department? And if you say no, again, what does it say here? Okay, it's not this one. All right, in one of these, it says, it's a bunch of them. So in one of these, it says pretty much, if you're suspended somewhere else, you might not be able to get oh, here we go. I stopped right at the spot I needed to. Having a formal disciplinary action proceeding affecting licensure initiated against licensee in another state, and vice versa. So, yeah, you might not be able to get your license anywhere else. Okay. All right, 2 questions here. Let's see. We're done for the day, right on time. 2 questions. Can you follow up with that client after the contract expires? Look, expired listings is what we do. Expired listings is the best way to start the real estate business. Is go after expired listings. They're the low hanging. Listen. It didn't work. It didn't work with the previous person. So could you help me, please? Right. So if you extend that olive branch, and I'll be like, oh my God, there's land. So let's go. Right. So after it expires, can you? Yes. While it's in effect, if you have a buyer, then you must present the buyer while it's in effect. All right. Next, is there a site where I can go and find a list of shady realtors? Shady realtors. Yeah, you can go to just search NJDOBI, which is New Jersey Department of Banking and Insurance. I think I shared that before. And you go to the enforcement section. Oop, that was not it. What am I doing? Great. There you go. All right. So it's DOBI NJ. I'm sorry, dobi.nj.gov, and then click Real Estate Commission, and then it says right here, enforcement activity. Okay. Now, okay. So here's the thing. When you click enforcement activity, it's going to show cases that exist. It's not going to show, shady realtors. No, unfortunately, that's not how it works. Because if I never got a case against me, does that mean that I'm a good realtor? No. It's like discrimination. Until somebody actually complains, discrimination doesn't exist. That's how it is. But you go here, and there you go. This person acted in bad faith, right? This is a licensed real estate broker. This person failed to notify that she had criminal charges against her in violation of her license, whatever it was, in violation of something. And you can always click here in this highlighted portion, and it takes you to the actual order. This guy doesn't say what it is, so you'll have to click to see what it is. This one was safe. There was insufficient evidence. Okay, order to show cause was issued for these cases, so they're still pending, and so on. There's 2019. There you go. Cases. These are determinations already. So on and so on. There's so many here. This person has to do 3 hours of CE credits in order to get back. Oh, he paid money out of his sale commission. He paid money out of his sales commission, and so on. Right? There's a lot of cases here. This one pretended to be a broker. This guy provided the lockbox code to potential buyer without permission. So what this means is you have lockboxes at the property, and we have to be there to open the lockbox, right? We cannot allow, this guy gave the code to the potential buyer, say, hey, I cannot make it there, but you go there, the code is whatever, right? To the buyer, so the buyer went there without them. All right, mishandling monies, and the records and so on. I mean, there's so many right here. Ridiculous. No, never. My jokes never change. All right, guys. Do you have any other questions they like to address? Let me know. If not, then we are done. Chapter. Yvette, have you seen a pattern? Seen a pattern of shady realtors working for? I cannot disclose that. Sorry, but there's always a bunch, fortunately. But I cannot be disclosing realties or people's names. Whatever's there, it's public. If it's something that's under investigation, I cannot disclose. Sorry. All right, Elda, don't go away. No, stay there. Hi, Elda. Thank you. Can you search brokerage firms? Yeah. Can you search shady brokerage firms? No, I don't think there's any place where you can search them. But brokerage firms, yeah. Just put your area that you're going to be working at, or whatever, right? And say real estate brokerages near me. Google does that, right? Thank you, Fabiola. Appreciate it. Elena, thank you. On the website, no, it doesn't search by brokerage. No, those are cases. Yep. All right, guys. If there's no other questions, guys, we have completed chapter 27. Tomorrow we'll see about 28, 29, and 30, and then math Thursday. See. All right, guys. So if you have any questions, just reach out to me on WhatsApp. If not, I'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget I have a 10 a.m. If you want to participate. As reviews, you can use it, or I'll see you at 5:30. Thank you. Have a great night, guys.